Inviting the moderator for this plenary session. He is the Chief Capacity Development Officer of Development Institute at the African Development Bank Group. Ladies and gentlemen, warm round of applause. Please join me as I call on Mr. Chidiebere Ibe as he comes forward.
Thank you very much, MC. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you again today. Today is a special day, and we are happy and grateful that you're here. And I want to apologize that we are starting slightly later than our scheduled time. Please bear with us. You know it was raining this morning. Okay, so thank you very much. Without wasting time, I would like to take us through the run of show for today's session. Like the MC has introduced me, my name is Chidiebere Ibe. I work for the African Development Bank. First and foremost, we'll start with the welcoming and opening remarks from the Director General of the Nigeria Country Department of the African Development Bank Group, in the person of Dr. Abdul Kamara. I'll call him up when it's time for him to speak. After his welcoming remarks, we will go into the panel discussion session, which is the main program, and that will start with a keynote presentation by the Director of African Development Institute of the African Development Bank, Dr. Eric Ogunleye. His presentation is something we are looking forward to, and it will set the landscape for our discussions today. After the keynote speech, we'll go into the panel discussions, and I have a panel of 8 speakers, including Dr. Eric Ogunleye himself, who is going to give the keynote speech. And I also have Dr. Adeyemi Dikweolu, who is a former economic advisor to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and a faculty member of the African Development Institute. Also have Dr. Emmanuel Owusu-Sekie. He is Director of Research, Policy and Programs of the African Center for Economic Transformation, based in Ghana. The African Center for Economic Transformation is a pan-African economic policy institute supporting Africa's long-term growth through transformation. We also have Professor Jane Mariaria, who is the Executive Director of the Partnership for Economic Policy, PEP. PEP is an organization that supports development in the global south by building the capacity of local researchers to produce high-quality, locally relevant evidence for better policy making and more sustainable outcomes. Prof is already connected online, so she's going to join us virtually. And we are going to have a robust time for discussions, about 30 minutes, where we'll get feedback, question and answer, and comment from the audience. So I will encourage you to make your contributions and to make them punchy without wasting time, because we'll have a very short time for this program. Finally, we will listen to the next steps and closing remarks from the from the manager of the Policy Management Division of the African Development Institute, Dr. Sidwell Hove, who is joining us virtually as well. But before I continue, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to recognize the participants from the transition states who have come from 22 countries across Africa. Please request their indulgence to stand up to be recognized. Please These ladies and gentlemen came from Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, Madagascar, Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Chad, the Gambia, Togo, Liberia, Zimbabwe, Niger, South Sudan, Burundi, Djibouti, Mali, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, the Comoros, Sudan, and Mozambique. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming. And you may be wondering what transition states mean. This is the designation by the African Development Bank for the special countries in Africa I've just mentioned that face more socio-economic, political, and environmental challenges and vulnerabilities than other countries, but who also possess immense potential and opportunities for economic transformation, given their vast natural and human resources and their innate resilience. The African Development Bank has a special support program for these countries, which is known as the Transition Support Facility, under which this program is being convened. So, gentlemen and ladies, thank you for coming. I know you went through a lot to be able to come here. The visa process and flight problems across Africa is one of the most difficult things you can encounter. And one of our participants, our speakers, even lost his luggage and was able to just get it yesterday. So people have to go through a lot to come here, and we appreciate your efforts. Thank you. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, I have the singular honor and privilege to invite to the podium the Director General of the Nigerian Country Department of the African Development Bank Group, Dr. Abdul Kamara. DG Kamara, please.
The President of the Nigerian Economic Society, Fellows of the Nigerian Economic Society, Council members of the Nigerian Economic Society, my colleague, Dr. Eric Ogunleye, Director of the African Development Institute at the African Development Bank, distinguished colleagues from transition states, you've just been recognized. All other participants, all protocols observed, good morning. Thanks for having me. I am honored to welcome you to this important policy dialogue on driving Africa's economic transformation in transition states, the role of capacity development and knowledge management. At this ongoing 66th annual conference of the Nigerian Economic Society under the theme, Rethinking Africa's Development, Pathways to Economic Transformation and Social Inclusion in a Changing Global Landscape. Of course, we all know the global landscape is changing, and particularly the flow of funds to our countries, which, as we all know, is very, very important for transition states, where the need for us to continue to remain engaged is very important. Let me start by acknowledging that both the theme of this conference and the policy dialogue are very, very timely, as they address the imperative of economic growth and transformation at a time when the global development financing landscape is changing with diverse consequences for weak and aid-dependent economies, most of which are among the transition states, as I just said. Achieving economic transformation in Africa, especially in transition states, my colleague just told you in the African Development Bank's balance what transition states mean. We used to say fragile states. I have served in fragile states for many years, actually for more than a decade, in Sudan, South Sudan, as resident representative of the African Development Bank at the UN, as Assistant Secretary General responsible for Darfur at one time, but also as Deputy Director General for the East Africa region, covering 14 countries with the Director General, of course, where I also had to supervise country managers in transition states, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, you name it. Even I think Burundi at that time was fragile, and others. So we know the specificities. We know the specificities. But achieving economic transformation in Africa, especially in transition states, is one that is of great interest to the bank, and that is why I was just telling you how active we were in those environments. The bank and the African Union, the African Union's outer NEPAD in that context, conducted a special study that was called Key Actions to Achieve Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Development in Africa. It was done in 2024. That's when the study was concluded. And that study identified several key policy actions and measures and instruments required to drive high-level growth and sustainable development, seeking to achieve not only the sustainable developments, but also the African Union's Agenda 2063. In particular, the study found that for Africa to achieve sustainable development, it must rapidly scale up economic growth rates to at least 7% annually and GDP per capita of not less than 3.5% consistently for 4 to 5 decades. The continent must also evenly distribute the benefits of growth. And that's why at the African Development Bank, we just don't talk of growth, we also talk of inclusive growth. We want growth to trickle down. We want to create jobs. We want young people to get connected to opportunities, to ensure that growth is meaningful, to ensure that it also addresses structural constraints that keep many of our countries backward. So the continent must evenly distribute that growth and improve the quality of lives for Africans in the short, medium, and long terms. This will require high levels of productivity in key sectors to drive Africa's GDP, of course, generally, but also GDP per capita growth rates to higher levels through improving inclusive and environmentally sustainable policies. To achieve this, the continent requires $811 billion per annum in financing. Colleagues, this is significant. And of course, because of that significance, we have a funding gap in the order of $680 billion per annum. So you can imagine what this means for transition states. For transition states in Africa to achieve structural transformation, which, as I said earlier, is very crucial to make growth more inclusive, to distribute, but also to make it consistent, transition state will need or require $210 billion per annum. And again, there's a financing gap here of about $188 billion. Indeed, the 2024 Africa transition states face the greatest constraints stemming from fragile institutions, conflict-affected economies, and limited revenue mobilization. You know, transition states are in a difficult situation. And that is why at the African Development Bank, we decided to set aside a special facility that we used to call the Fragile State Facility. But we know fragility is not a static phenomenon. It's dynamic. You can be fragile today, and tomorrow we are out of fragility. So that led us to paraphrase that nomenclature to transition states. And we know the specific difficulties that they face. Governance is weak, not necessarily because of the making of those at governance, but just because countries may be emerging from conflicts, some may even be emerging from war, and some are faced with unique challenges of struggling to manage natural resources. So therefore, we created the Transition State Facility, and thanks to that facility, we are here today doing this high-level dialogue and consultations. Driving transformative growth will require significant investments in 4 key sectors. Now, in transition states, yes, but also across the continent, in infrastructure, in energy, in education, but also technology and innovation. I just spoke about the youth, especially soft skills and capacity development. We know most countries today are at the crossroads, grappling with the problem of a mismatch between education acquired at our tertiary institutions and the demands of the labor market. The African Development Bank is conscious of this, and it's a gap that we are working very closely to address. In this country, we have what we call the IDIs, investing in digital and creative enterprises. With the Islamic Development Bank and others, we are investing some $618 million, currently approved, working with the Bank of Industry in Nigeria, to create 50 innovation centers at 50 universities, but also about 36 centers in polytechnics. So some assessments have been done, private sector has been contacted, expression of interest and assessments and so on, and selection, because it's going to be a public-private partnership that will address this situation, that would look at the creative sector, the innovation sector, and then we'll create funds, of course, that will ensure that at the conclusion of the project, there will be sustainability, and those structures and institutions will continue to survive. The policy dialogue is about finding solutions to achieve transformative growth in Africa's transition states through capacity development and knowledge management. The challenges are not insurmountable. We all know that, and that's why we're here. And I'm sure the conversation you've had over the last 2 days clearly has given us the impetus and belief and determination that we definitely can do it. So we have the innate capacity in Africa to find solutions to our problems. It is therefore imperative that we, at this policy dialogue, identify locally relevant policy actions. I'm sure you already have progressed in this the past 2 days. But as we conclude, and of course the panel will also shed light later on some of the most salient and important issues that we should take back home, that we should monitor, that we should follow up, that should become part of our determination to transform our economies. Let me reiterate that the African Development Bank's continuous commitment to capacity development on the continent, especially in transition states, remains impeccable. The bank has dedicated a funding window, as I said earlier, the Transition State Support Facility, which among others forms projects, development projects, but also capacity building, knowledge management across our work in transition states. We emphasize transition states because we don't want to leave anyone behind. And because, as I said earlier, we understand the specific problems, the specific challenges that they are faced, that you may have heard over the past 2 days, but that will also come in the panel. So, at this juncture, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to thank the Nigerian Economic Society for providing this platform to host this important policy dialogue. I would also like to thank the government of Nigeria for providing a safe and conducive environment for this conference and dialogue event to hold. Let me also thank the resource persons who will facilitate this policy dialogue, or who have already been facilitating it over the past 2 days, And most importantly, our delegates who've just been recognized from the 22 transition states across the continent. I think let's give them a big round of applause. Because they have chosen to grace this occasion with their physical presence. I believe that this gathering will spark new ideas, forge meaningful partnerships and networks, and inspire bold actions which together can drive economic transformation in transition states through capacity development and also addressing the needs on the continent. Once more, welcome to this lovely city of Abuja, where you already have spent a couple of days. We already have been deliberating for the past 2 days, and I wish you a successful deliberation as you conclude this. And of course, the African Development Bank, your bank, stands with you. Whatever has operational implications that you identify here, we will take it forward, we will fund it, and we have the financial muscle to do so. Thank you.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, let us give another round of applause to the DG. The speech could not have been better, and I'm sure that we'll have gotten more insight into why we are here from that opening remarks and welcome address. Thank you very much, DG. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been giving a directive by the president of the Nigerian Economic Society that the council members would like to have a photograph with our special delegates from the transition states. So I would like us to have that now with the DG of the Nigeria Country Department, because he might leave any time because of his other schedules. So I would like the photographers to come and organize us to have a group photograph with the transition state participants and the council members of the Nigerian Economic Society. Thank you very much. Please, you can come up. Come up. Okay. Can extend up to that end. Sure they can. Get everybody. Oh, ladies should go in front. Ladies should go in front.
Okay.
Ladies, please go in front. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, DG Camara. Thank you very much, President of NES and Council members. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to recognize that we have participants who have joined virtually. So please, we know that you're there. Please, you are part of this dialogue session. So we want to thank you for joining virtually. Thank you very much. So now we have to move into the business session. And to kickstart that, we are going to have a keynote speech by the director of the African Development Institute, Dr. Eric Ogunleye. I have the pleasure to call up Dr. Ogunleye to come and give his keynote speech.
We're all academics here and technical people, so I won't go into protocols. In academic and policy making, we go straight into business, isn't it? Excellent. Great. I see the thumb up from the president of the Nigerian Economic Society, so I take that for a yes. What I'll be doing here would just be a teaser to the conversation that we follow, just to set the scene, set the stage. Some of the things I'm going to say are things you already know, but it's just to get us thinking so that as we go into the panel and also to engage you, the audience, it will make life a lot easier to help you know how we're thinking and to stimulate your mind. Now, let me join the Director General of the African Development Bank's Nigeria Country Department, Dr. Abdul Kamara, to welcome all of us to this policy dialogue. We really appreciate all colleagues who came all the way from different parts of Africa to be here, and we are grateful for that. Let me also thank you, the Nigerian Economic Society, the president, the council members, for giving us the opportunity to partner, to collaborate, to deliver on this policy dialogue. It is unique, to the best of my knowledge. It's the first time, to the best of my knowledge, that this is happening. And I really want to commend the leadership of the Nigerian Economic Society under the leadership of the president, Professor Adeola Adenekinju. Thank you very much for bringing us together. We're all aware of the theme of this economic conference. We want to rethink Africa's development. And in that rethinking, we want to say, what are the pathways that we can take to get to transformation? And the reason we have brought our colleagues that we're focusing this policy dialogue on transition states is because these are the countries where the needs, capacity gaps are highest. So it's important, therefore, that we get to know what can these group of countries do differently to achieve transformation. And so, coming together to talk about what we can do in these countries is absolutely very important. I think this point has been made, and I think it's important to make it again, that when we're talking about transition states, people call it fragile states, but we call them transition because some sees it as it's a bit of a stigma when you say a country is fragile. Nobody would like to be considered to be fragile. But they are transition, and like the DG said, it's a continuous process. You see improvement from a certain condition moving to another condition. But the point remains, though, that what we know in this group of countries, based on the work we have been doing with them, is the fact that they are grappling with a lot of issues. issues surrounding economic issues, political issues, insecurity in some of them, climate-related challenges, organized crime in some places. So all of these really make either doing business or governance or any other thing that could help to achieve transformation to be challenging in this group of countries. When we started this project less than 2 years ago, there were 22 such countries. But to help you understand the challenge Africa faces, the number has now increased to 24. So that tells you that what we're talking about here is real. There are things staring at us in the face on a daily basis. If you look at the Sahel, you look at the Lake Chad Basin, you look at the Horn of Africa, you look at the Great Lakes, we have seen hotspots of instability in this group of countries. In fact, if you look at the corridor of conflict from Mali to Somalia, it spans about 4,000 miles. And this covers about 10% of sub-Saharan Africa's landmass. So that tells you how big that is. And that if we don't address these challenges, we may just be sitting on a time bomb, as they always say. Now, fragility has poses a lot of formidable challenges to transformation on the continent. It has also constrained a number of countries from growing. And remember, we're not talking about just growth, we're talking about inclusive growth. We're talking about sustained development. Now, when these issues I'd mentioned are factored in, you see a number of countries falling far behind. So the reason we need to engage these transition states is to ensure that no one is left behind. If you focus only on the countries that are doing well, the middle income, the low income, you will not be doing justice, you leave some of these countries ahead. So it's important, therefore, that we ensure that we accommodate them in our policies. And in many cases, they have peculiar needs that require that we focus on the challenges that they face. Now, there are over 250 million Africans that are directly affected by fragility, and there are about 576,000 lives that have been lost in the past 2 decades as a result of these fragilities. And by the middle of 2024, there were 44.5 million Africans that were forcibly displaced. And out of this number, 77% of them were internal displacement. Now think about it. If you have such internal displacements, will people be thinking about economic growth? No, the focus is on living first. They have to be alive before you can think about anything else. So that helps us then to see that even focusing on policies that will promote growth or transformation become challenging when people are struggling to survive. And there is one negative impact this increased fragility has had on this group of countries, and it is the channeling of resources that should have been spent on transformative projects, infrastructure, to military spending. So you see a number of countries, because of insecurity that they face, monies that should have been used to build hospitals, to build a health system or the education system, are diverted to buying maybe ammunition, arms, for the military to be able to fight the fragility or the insecurity that they face in those countries. In fact, what we have seen is that conflict-affected countries have had a 20% drop in their annual growth. In addition to that, we have also seen 2.5% decline in social outcomes. These are scary, right? But that is the situation we have in this group of countries. We have also seen that 28% of the GDP per capita in these countries are lower 10 years ago or 10 years after the conflict began. So climate change is also a major issue. Many of them do not have the capacity either for adaptation to be able to deal with the challenges of, climate change vulnerabilities. If you look at South Sudan, for example, and I'm sure some of our colleagues here are from South Sudan, the GDP contracted by 26.4% due to the conflict that is spilling over from Sudan. If you also look at Zimbabwe, the growth of that country declined by 3.4% as a result of the El Niño's typhoon. So when we're talking about fragility or we're talking about transition state of these countries, they are not just statistics, they are things people can relate to. They are real life situations. So to achieve transformation, therefore, African countries, like the DG said, we conducted a study, we call it Strategic Framework on Key Actions to Achieve Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Development in Africa. And it is found that for any country to achieve transformation, you must grow at least 7% for up to 30 or 40 years for you to transform. And I'll really recommend that we go read that report, because we channel different policy actions for different actors: the national governments, the development partners, the international financial institutions at different levels, regional, continental, and country level, that can help countries to achieve these growth objectives. Now, the DG also, what is required, the huge resources that are required for countries to transform. 495.6 billion annually is what is needed, and that is about 17% of projected GDP in Africa. But there's a large financing gap. The gap is up to 402 billion US dollars annually. Take that out of 495, and that helps you to see that we're just scratching the surface. So a lot needs to be done. And now, focusing on the transition states themselves, they need about 157 billion annually. But currently, what gap do we have? 144 billion. So you can just see that we're barely there. So meaning therefore that a lot of deliberate and intentional actions are required when it comes to supporting this group of countries. Like the panel we had 2 days ago, leadership is important in some of this group of countries. There are areas of focus that we need to look at. We also need some targeted policies. It's interesting to know that from the work we do now across African countries, we have seen that countries are beginning to move away from the copy and paste policy approach in the past. In the past, it used to be what is done where, just bring it and superimpose it on this economy. We're beginning to see a crop of Africans who are very conscious of their environment, who know that the policy environment is different from those other places, and are thinking inwardly regarding what needs to be done to achieve productivity, to achieve resilience in this group of countries. And so that is where the issue of capacity comes in. Like I said earlier, capacity is absolutely crucial to policy making. Capacity is crucial to managing institutions that ultimately, determine the outcomes that a country achieves. So, empowering individuals and institutions are important. And that is the reason we have all of you here. Many of our colleagues, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we have the time, regarding some of the capacity development initiatives we have put together that can help not just only the transition states, but the entire countries within Africa. Knowledge management, we know, is absolutely important. We need to have insights. We need to understand our environment. We need to be able to generate information and data. We need to be able to share knowledge and apply them to be able to sharpen our strategy and our policy. We also know that capacity building must be rooted in relevant contextual knowledge to make them impactful. Indigenous knowledge is very important, and that's where the bank, African Development Bank, has a unique, entry point. Because we sit with the countries, we know better, and many of us are also Africans. Some of us have played at the high level of policy making in the country, so we understand what the challenges are. And to be honest with you, there have been some meetings we have had, and those African policymakers will tell us, we are telling you this because you are our bank, your African Development Bank. We know you understand us. So it is indeed interesting to see that together we can form that virtuous cycle that we want to see with regard to learning, building capacity for learning, enhancing the capacity for knowledge creation. And like I always say, creating knowledge is just the beginning. Knowledge is not an end in itself. I know we have a number of academic colleagues here where knowledge is churn out papers to get promoted, yes? But the impact of that knowledge is the extent to which it becomes useful for policy making, and that is the end. When that research you've made is making impact, that is when you would have achieved the objective of your knowledge. So I know, like I said again, this is just a teaser to just stimulate our thinking. So the bank is doing a lot of things, like I said earlier, and we'll have the opportunity to go back to them. But one thing I'd like to emphasize before I give the room for the moderator to come back is we are open to partnership when it comes to supporting countries, whether they're in transition or not in transition. And I'm happy to see a number of colleagues here from institutions that we have been partnering with. YFM, my boss, Dr. Baba Musa is here. We've done a lot. On Monday, we had one of the modules of our training where we are collaborating with them. The African Economic Research Consortium, one of the very foremost leaders of the institution when it was younger, Professor Lua Jakaye is here, who headed the research and mentored us in the process. We are partnering with them. And this one with Nigerian Economic Society is another typical classical case of partnership. So we are open to partnerships. And we look forward to different institutions, GIABA, ETAF, MEFMI, I've mentioned YFM, IMF, the World Bank, UNECA. They are all institutions they are opening to. And even for academics, we welcome your partnership to make this work. So let me conclude by saying that capacity development, knowledge management are the engines of transformation in Africa. Again, in the past, the African Development Bank used to be known as an infrastructure financing institution. In fact, when we started going into this area of soft infrastructure, some of the board members kicked back at us and said, no, how can you be going into public financial management? Why should you go into debt sustainability? No, leave that to the World Bank, leave that to the IMF. But we insisted and said, we know this economy better than some of these global institutions. And some of them agree with us. And that was how they came to approve some of the tools that we're using to deliver today for Africa. So strategic vision is absolutely important. Bold investments are also very important. And like I said, strong partnerships are also very important. So thank you once again for listening. Again, like I said, I won't call it keynote speech. It's just a teaser to set the stage, to set the scene for the discussion that will soon follow.
Please, a better round of applause for the director. You agree with me that he understands the situation of the transition states, and you agree with me that the bank understands the situation and is doing something about it. And one of the reasons why we are here is because we want to do something about it. an event that is convening over 2,500 people, cutting across scholars, practitioners, captains of industry, policymakers in government, and so on and so forth, cannot be but a very good platform for us to learn what we can do more to support the transition states. So thank you very much, Dr. Eric Ogunleye, for that keynote speech, which you have christened teaser. Thank you for your humility. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to move forward now into the panel session proper. And I want to invite the panelists. I have the privilege again to invite Dr. Eric Ogunleye. He has given the keynote speech. He's not going to discuss it as well. You're welcome, sir. I also like to invite one of our speakers, Dr. Adeyemi Dikpeolu. I had introduced him earlier on as former economic advisor to the President of Nigeria and former development practitioner. Doctor, you're welcome, sir. And also a former ambassador. So you can see experience, the quantum of experience wrapped in one person. We are going to be listening to him today as well. I want also to invite to the podium Dr. Emmanuel Owusu-Sekere, the Director of Research, Policy and Programs of ASSET. ASSET, like I said earlier, is focused on transformation in Africa. Doctor, you're welcome. And very importantly, the only lady in the panel. Without her, we will not have the panel, I can assure you. So permit me to invite Professor Jane Mariaria, the Executive Director of the Partnership for Economic Policy. She joins us virtually. Prof, you're welcome. So, without much ado, or further ado, we have to go into the panel discussions. Is Prof there? Okay, let's get Prof on the screen. She's there, okay. Okay, so permit me to have a seat and fire the questions. Thank you. Okay, we all know the theme of this discussion, and we know that we are here to find solutions on how to achieve economic transformation in transition states in Africa, especially with the instrument of knowledge management and capacity building. So my erudite panel here and all of us are going to be identifying those solutions so that by the end of this session, we have a toolkit that we will take back. The transition countries are here themselves with the support of other countries in Africa and also our development partner, especially the African Development Bank. We use that toolkit to support these countries in their efforts towards economic growth and transformation. My first question, therefore, will go to Dr. Emmanuel Sekre. Doctor, the inclusive growth study that the keynote speaker talked about and also Dr. Kamara talked about highlights that only 7 to 10% growth sustained over 4 to 5 decades can support Africa to achieve its development goals. However, average growth remains volatile and insufficient, especially in transition states. Key barriers include weak institutions, like we have had, low public investments, efficiency, governance deficits, and inadequate infrastructure. Overcoming these barriers is essential to transformative growth and prosperity that ensures inclusive and sustainable livelihood. I want to ask you, what bold steps and reforms must governments of African transition states prioritize to strengthen state capacity, improve governance, and drive inclusive growth that can be sustained over multiple decades? Doctor?
Okay, thank you very much. I was hoping that I won't be the first to speak. And thank you for inviting us to be part of this at Asset. I bring you greetings from the CEO and the management. We are very happy to be part of this conversation. First of all, you agree with me that transition states are in different transition journeys. Some are still in conflict, some are in post-conflict fragility, transitioning towards stability. Some have just transitioned from democratic rule to military rule. Some are also now transitioning between economic systems of development. In fact, all of us are in one transition journey or the other, even if you are not called a transition state. In Ghana, Zambia, Kenya, we are transitioning in a different government. Old governments have lost election. Others are transitioning between economic strategies. So the key thing is this. Where there's still conflict, I think efforts must first focus on ending the conflict or stopping the conflict before any developmental activity can start. So I'll answer the question within a non-conflict scenario where there is stability and we're trying to build forward better post-crisis. I think the first thing, and for me, the most important thing, is to ensure that reforms focus on establishing good governance and visionary leadership. Good governance and visionary leadership is where the buck starts and ends. Why is that important? It's important because it is good governance and visionary leadership that ensures that resources are appropriately allocated to ensure that the generation of growth is inclusive and the distribution of the gains from the growth is also equitable. That is one thing that has been completely missing in our respective countries. But even before that, good governance and visionary leadership ensures that there is an apolitical development agenda that represents where the country actually wants to go. Every country has the right to decide where it wants to go to, how it intends to get there, because there are different pathways to every single destination. Currently, our development plans are not national in the true sense of the word national. They are basically political manifestos, and it keeps us moving in circles based on who is in power. So we have become guinea pigs for ideological experiments for our political elite, and we are not getting anywhere with that. Thirdly, it is good governance and visionary leadership that ensures that the political economy challenges we face are adequately addressed. What do I mean by that? Let me be blunt here. We steal more than we need for development from ourselves. And that's the elephant in the room that we keep moving around. The corruption has to be addressed. If you can address corruption in our respective countries, if you can intercept the illicit financial flows and leverage our remittance inflows very well, if you can do these three things, our dependence on debt will be significantly reduced and Africa will be capable of financing our own development. We cannot say African solutions to African problems if our development is not funded by us. And finally, good governance and visionary leadership is how we ensure that our implementations to our development growth strategy, trade strategy, industrial policy action plan, human capacity development strategies are properly designed, they are properly synchronized, they are coherent, they are consistent in outlook, and implementation is synchronized. I think Dr. Gunyele mentioned yesterday, in almost every African country you go, you would find a development strategy. It looks coherent on paper, it looks consistent in outlook, but the implementation is helter-skelter. Ministry of Finance doesn't know what Ministry of Trade is doing. Everybody's doing their own thing. The synchronization of implementation is very important. We need to build capacity aimed at addressing the skills needs of our development strategies. These are some of the few things that we need to look at in building forward better as transition states. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. You mentioned very important ingredients to achieving inclusive and transformative growth in our countries, especially governance. I can tell you that governance is everything, like you've said. And you said that visionary leadership and governance will ensure that resources that are mobilized are utilized adequately to achieve the desired growth, and that the policies and plans that we put in place are implemented. If there's no good governance or good governance capacity, this cannot be done. Thank you very much, Doctor. So I want to move on to my second panelist. I want to move to Dr. Adeyemi Dikweolu. My mouth is too heavy to ask him a question, but he has permitted me to. So, sir, you will agree with me that financing is at the heart of economic growth and transformation. The African Development Bank's Mind the Gaps Report 2025 estimates Africa's annual financing gap for structural transformation at $680.3 billion US. And for transition states, the annual financing gap is estimated at $188.1 billion. Sir, what resource mobilization measures and sources in terms of domestic and non-domestic sources do you think that Africa, particularly transition states, should adopt to meet the financing gaps and achieve the structural transformation that is necessary for inclusive and sustainable development on the continent? Doctor, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And permit me to thank the African Development Institute and the Nigerian Economic Society for having me here today. You made the most important point, which is that we know that financing has a critical role to play in this process of structural transformation. Indeed, the importance attached to financing for development can be seen by the convening of the United Nations Financing for Development Conference every 10 years. And so we recall that just a few months ago in Sevilla, Spain, the 4th United Nations Financing for Development Conference took place. It addressed a number of issues which I will not go through, but let me instead, for the benefit of those who have to work on policy issues, focus on 5 issues. The first, taxation. The second is illicit financial flows. The third is remittances. The fourth is official development assistance. And the fifth is debt. We all know that tax, of course, has a conventional role to play in provision of public services, education, healthcare, social protection, as well as, of course, for infrastructure. But the tax to GDP ratio for African countries is only about 17%, which is low compared to, say, Latin America and Caribbean, which is 29%, or East Asia and Pacific, which is 26%. So this points to a low tax effort relative to GDP. Of course, it's very convenient to blame the large informal sector for this. But we should also bear in mind that Africans pay a lot of implicit taxes by providing their own water, their own security, their own street lighting. In fact, there's a joke here that in Nigeria here, that every household is a local government. Now, closely related to the issue of low tax to GDP is the whole issue of illicit financial flows, especially commercial illicit financial flows, such as tax evasion, aggressive tax avoidance, and profit shifting. These are leakages. And of these leakages, commercial illicit financial flows account for about 66% of a conservative estimate of IFFs of about 90 billion from Africa. Now, of course, since we know that the whole idea of illicit financial flows is to hide the money, you can guess that that estimate is very, very, very low. So it's important that we pay attention to how to stem illicit financial flows. And as part of that effort, we have to pay attention to the ongoing negotiations at the United Nations for the Convention on International Tax Cooperation. One of our primary aims in that negotiation for African countries must be to ensure that tax is paid where economic activity takes place. So this habit of multinational companies making profits here and declaring them somewhere else is something that we have to pay attention to. The third issue I wanted to raise about raising resources are remittances. Now, we all know that recent studies have shown that remittances are even more important than overseas official development assistance. But we found in Africa that remittances grew from 42 billion in 2017 to about 56 billion last year. It looks like a fairly good effort, but it's not. If we look at South Asia, mostly India, for instance, they were able to double such flows from 117 billion in 2017 to over 207 billion last year. So there is scope again for raising those resources. And we know that those resources are not only important for household needs and boosting domestic consumption, they're also important because they relieve the pressure on the foreign exchange needs for wider society. As I mentioned aid, and I want to say that, you found a lot of developed countries reducing their aid, and instead of meeting the 0.7% that they had committed 2 years ago, are even reducing what they had given before. But I find that a lot of us as Africans, we are jumping onto the bandwagon of celebrating the end of aid. I don't support aid dependency, but I think we must realize that such cuts and such drastic cuts will necessarily impact on African ability to provide some health services, education, and humanitarian outcomes. I strongly feel if we expect rich people in our countries to help support the poorer segments of society, then rich countries in the international community must support poorer countries, especially when it comes to helping populations that are in poverty or that have been displaced. Then, debt, the elephant in the room. We know that Africa is not doing well there, but we know that we have to borrow because borrowing is a natural part of the development process. But what should concern us most is to avoid falling into debt distress. And I suppose that we all know, and it's worth repeating, that out of the countries in debt distress, 7 out of 9 are in debt distress in Africa. 14 out of 26 are at high risk of distress, and 17 out of 24 are at moderate risk of distress. So if you want to define debt distress, you just look at Africa. So, but I think in doing so, we have to pay attention to several things. The most important is we have to try and reduce our borrowing costs. The sovereign spread on African debt, as at 2 years ago, was about 10.2 percentage points. Sovereign debt, you know, the sovereign spread, that's what you are paying as distinct from what the best rated country is paying in terms of their bonds. Africa was paying 10 percentage points more. In Asia, it was 1.8%. In emerging Europe, it was 5.9% percentage points. In Latin, percentage points. So Africa is paying almost doubles in terms of sovereign spread percentage points. So Africa is paying almost doubles in terms of sovereign spread as compared to other countries. So it's important then, therefore, that we also continue, therefore, to pay attention to the poor ratings given to Africa by global rating agencies. I will be a bit provocative later as to whether you need an African ratings agency, but the point is that we must continue to pay attention to that. And we must also pay attention to the fact that the process, and my brother will attest to that, for debt resolution through the common framework for debt treatments is very slow. I think of the 5 have approached, perhaps have reached some form of settlement. So, again, the point being that if African countries are to boost their domestic revenue, they must pay attention to taxation, they must pay attention to stemming illicit financial flows, they must pay attention to boosting remittances, they must pay attention to reducing their debt burden, and we must insist that, yes, we don't want to be dependent on aid, but there is a moral obligation to support our countries through official development assistance. I think I'll let...
Thank you very much, Doctor. If I had the power, I would have awarded you professorship. You know, yeah. Maybe they'll do that after this session. Thank you very much. You said a lot of things, you know, and you also recapped it at the end. That resource mobilization is key, and areas of attention will include increasing our tax to GDP ratio and taxing optimally, and especially also blocking the leakages in our tax systems, and of course blocking illicit financial flows that happen in Africa. That Africa loses almost $90 billion US, which is more than the official development aid that comes to Africa annually. And of course, we have to encourage remittances. Sorry, it's like the battery is down. Yeah, so we have to encourage remittances and also use remittances. Yeah, the batteries. Yeah, so I was saying that we have to encourage remittances. We see the numbers from other regions. Africa can do better, but more importantly, how we use remittances. It shouldn't just be for consumption. It should also be for investment in Africa. And of course, ODA is declining, but we have to continue to encourage partnerships with development partners. And of course, we have to manage our debts better. With that, I want to move to our next panelist that's joining us virtually. Can you please put Dr. up? Sorry, Professor Jane Mariara. Is she there? Okay. So, Prof, I want to thank you for joining us virtually in spite of your busy schedule. I want to ask you relating to the world of development partnership, which is changing quickly from the ways that we know it. Development financing for multilateral and bilateral. Okay, sorry about that. Development financing from multilateral, bilateral, and private philanthropy is shrinking with adverse consequences for aid-dependent nations, many of whom are transition states in Africa. Prof, I want to ask you, from your vantage position as a global think tank on economic policy partnership, working with diverse partners across the globe, what do you see as the future of international development partnerships? And what must Africa, especially transition states, be doing or do differently to take advantage of the new development financing landscape, or at least to mitigate its adverse consequences in order to achieve economic transformation in Africa? Prof, please. Please, Prof, it's like you're muted. Can you unmute yourself and speak? Okay, while we are sorting out Prof's connection, let us go to another.
From my end, I'm not mute.
We can hear you now, Prof.
Okay. The problem is the app. Okay, can I proceed? Can I proceed?
Yes.
Okay, let's start. Unless I
Prof, hold on, please. Let's check the mics.
But let me say thank you very much for having me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Prof.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure, and sorry that I could not join you physically. And of course, I know I start at a disadvantage because I've not been in that room to hear what has been for the last 2 days. First, Nigerian Economic Society for what seems to have been a very interesting, exciting, and successful conference. Actually, when I looked at the room, I was like, you people need to think about perhaps an African economic society so that you go beyond the Nigerian Economic Society. You have the power to bring everyone together. So can you confirm that you can hear me so that I proceed? Now there is no echo at least.
Yes. Go ahead, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So thank you very much, moderator, for that question. Very relevant question, very important question. I think from what has been said for the session that I've listened to, and perhaps a lot has already been said over the last 2 days or so, we know that, of course, there's so much need for economic transformation in Africa. We've been told about 24 transition states in Africa, and even beyond the 24, all the other countries that are not included in those 24 still need a lot of to work on the economic transformation if Africa is going to experience better economic growth outcomes than we currently are seeing. And I think the keynote did mention, was it the keynote or the welcome remarks? Dr. Kamara did mention that really there's so much needs for the transition states, and there are a lot of gaps which are there. So this is what I want to pick up on and emphasize that, of course, when we look at the needs or the future of development partnership, it's first to recognize these enormous needs and not to overemphasize them because they have already been mentioned, but to note, for instance, that the OECD, for instance, has documented, and we know it also, I'm sure it's there in the African Development Bank, and all of us maybe seated in the room know that development partnership, their available resources have been declining, especially maybe over the last 1 year or so. And in 2025 alone, for instance, 17%. And of course, the biggest cut has been in sub-Saharan Africa. IMF has also documented about the declining ODI flows in Africa. And of course, if this is flowing, then it's a question of which way then do we see this future and partnerships. Do we expect, for instance, multilateral transfer to increase? We know they have also been declining in 2020. I mean, actually, I think since 2023, there have been fluctuations, yes, but you can see that the trend has been downwards. And of course, we know with what happened with USAID and now the realignment in European funding, we have reason to worry about the future of development partnerships. However, there are still some positive developments with what is available. For instance, the climate finance is surging. At least the climate finance has been increasing, especially through multilateral development banks. For instance, in 2024, there was quite a very big, I think around almost 137 billion dollars for climate financing, including that 3% increase in private sector funding. This is our organization has been doing some work on MDB reforms, climate financing over the last 2024, most of 2024, concluding in 2025, and we can see that there has been quite a surge in climate financing, and that has been documented. The other positive climate financing, and that has been documented. The other positive aspect that we are seeing in this is the emphasis on just energy transitions and electricity scale up. I think there has been a lot of talk again about just energy transition, work that we are doing in PEP, and of course, work done by others such as Club of Rome, Power Shift Africa, and many. They are documenting what is happening in that area, and a lot of investment is going in. I think we have examples such as not just in Africa, but even outside Africa. It seems like it's something that is quite positive, even as ODA is shrinking. That point is about the MDB diversification into capital markets. And we have seen that, for instance, the African Development Fund plans to raise maybe about $5 billion every 3 years through capital markets to reach actually or showing a shift away from reliance on traditional donor aid. And it's because we know that if Africa, for instance, we do continue relying on donor aid, on ODA, we are going to be in trouble. Of course, there are others, such as the boosting of the infrastructure or the resilience in infrastructure and connectivity to attract private capital, which of course is supported by African Union, among other institutions. But then what can we do to take advantage of this new development financing landscape, as asked by the moderator? I think some of the points have actually been raised by the previous speaker, so maybe because of interest of time, what I would say is that the first that goes to our African countries, especially the transition states, I think we've been told about capacity building, which is very important, which is an emphasis for PEP. But I think one of the things that we must deal with is capacity building in debt management, because I think we end up in a circle where we are almost strangling our economies because of managing that debt. I think one of the speakers said that we are stealing more from ourselves than maybe we are investing. So we need the debt, yes, but what are we doing with it? How are we dealing with it? We really need to educate or to train our countries on how to handle that. Of course, we need to enhance trade finance through what we call the de-risking schemes, building on the African Development Bank's risk participation agreements. Perhaps these have already been mentioned in the conference over the last 2 days. Then we need to engage in public-private and blended finance initiatives. I think we talked about climate financing, a lot about MDB reforms, but really one of the things that is very important in the continent is how we bring in public, private, and blended finance initiatives. For instance, we have what we call the Africa Climate Hub, among others. Region-wide infrastructure financing, I think this was mentioned, work that we have done in PEP with Club of Rome. And of course, even if you look at examples from Africa Union, I think the emphasis is there on the importance of global green funding platforms, MDB programs, and how this can be used to build finance infrastructure. And finally, of course, and I think it was mentioned again by one of the speakers, the issue of how do we strengthen our Pan-African financial institutions, and we have the role of the AU here, which can work perhaps with the African countries, the transition countries, with the African Development Bank to do that. And of course, finally, mobilizing domestic resources. I think this was mentioned by Dr. Adeyemi. Thank you. Maybe I'll stop there and pick up other points later.
Thank you very much, Prof. I don't think I have to say any other thing after Prof has spoken. I don't qualify to...
I can't hear you. Please unmute.
Hello, me. Hello? Prof, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. So I want to thank you for that erudite presentation, and I don't qualify to summarize what you have said. So I want to thank you.
You've gone quiet again, please.
Oh my God, what's going on? Please, IT. Prof, can you hear me now? So if you can unmute yourself, Prof. Unmute yourself.
Can't hear, please.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you, Prof. And we have listened to Prof. She mentioned a lot of things. She actually exposed the problem and also made far-reaching recommendations on what African countries can do. And one of such recommendation that stands out and which leads to the next round of questions is on capacity development. Capacity development for governance, of which public financial management and debt management is part of that. She also mentioned increase in trade finance, especially with the de-risking schemes, which is being championed by the African Development Bank, and of course, leveraging private capital for PPPs across Africa, and of course, mobilizing domestic revenues. On that note, I want to go to Dr. Eric Ogunleye, who is of this policy dialogue. And I want to ask you, sir, given that the African Development Institute of the African Development Bank has been a champion in providing capacity development and knowledge management for economic development and transformation in Africa, especially in transition states, what are the major initiatives and approaches the Institute is utilizing to achieve its capacity development and knowledge management objectives in the regional member countries, and of course, which transition countries are part of them? And how successful have these initiatives been? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dechidi. Let me start by just doing a quick introduction of what the African Development Institute is. Many of us may not fully understand what that stands for. The African Development Institute is the bank's department responsible for looking for partnerships wherever you may find them to broker instruments, tools, platform for the delivery of capacity development to the regional member countries. There are 54 of them. So that is what the African Development Institute is. We look for partners, we look for ways we can collaborate to develop what we call homegrown capacity development solutions for the problem of Africa. And that point about homegrown needs to be really emphasized, because over the years, many of us are used to capacity development platforms that are provided by global institutions especially. But we need homegrown solutions. Like we have been saying, Africa is not bereft of policies, options that can help us to grow. Another thing we also do is we ensure that those solutions are tailored. They are context specific. They take into consideration the needs of the environment. So that's what the Institute is. Again, like I said, I emphasize the issue of partnerships. So we look for partners wherever we could find them. The IMF, the World Bank, continental institutions, UN global specialized agencies are all partners. Now, how do we deliver it? For us, capacity development comes in different forms. One of them is training. Another one is technical assistance. Yet we also do what we call peer-to-peer learning. We also ensure that we do what we call policy dialogue. We have chosen a theme that is relevant to the transformation of Africa, and we are exploring it. We are getting different perspectives that can help us to understand the issues better and what we need to do to solve the problem, to find solutions. So that is what we do. Now, we have a platform, we have a framework for the delivery of that capacity development. We have a strategy. We call it Capacity Development Strategy, which outlines the key issues of strategy within Africa into 3 pillars. The first one is program and project capacity development, and we have seen this in many African countries. Some of them do not have the capacity to even develop projects bankable projects that they can take to development finance institutions. So what we do is to help them, handhold them in some cases, to be able to develop projects that they can bring to development finance institutions, whether it is the World Bank, whether it's the UN system, whether it is the African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and so on, but have that capacity to be able to develop those projects and implement them. Now, the second pillar focuses on policy. Some countries do not have sufficient capacity to conceptualize, to design, to implement policies that can help them to achieve transformation. Some of them could be debt sustainability policies. Some could be macroeconomic policies. Some of them could be public financial management policies. And the third one is what I have talked about a couple of times, to say we need to manage the knowledge we generate. We need to curate them. We need to make them useful. We need to make them available to the policymakers who will implement them. And that is the third pillar, where we're looking at knowledge management and also making information available. So those are the three pillars we have in this strategy that helps us to be able to deal with capacity in Africa. Now, what are some of the tools we have developed? Again, like I said, what we're trying to do in the Institute is to look inward based on our indigenous knowledge and understanding of the African economies, to develop solutions, tools that can help us to achieve our goal of supporting our country, strengthening their capacities. So one thing we have done is to develop what we call academies. So we have the Public Financial Management Academy that is focusing on public financial and debt-related issues. We have the Macroeconomic Policy Management Academy that is helping countries to develop models. Models. We've helped some countries like Central African Republic, Zimbabwe, to develop what I know most of us here are familiar with, dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models. And currently, Sierra Leone had come to us and said they want us to help them to develop, computable general equilibrium model. Central African Republic said they need macroeconometric models. Again, like I said previously, the African Development Bank was not known for all of this. But we now see that these are enablers. If countries are not able to manage their policy effectively, if they do not have the capacity to do that, whatever project you develop for them will not have impact, or may have limited impact at best. So through these academies, we are supporting countries to ensure that they have the required capacity. One other thing we're also doing, especially from the project and program perspective, is to do what we call the country capacity needs assessment. Now, in the past, some global institutions, some development or capacity development institutions that come to Africa, you just go to a country and you start implementing capacity development programs. What we do in our case is to first of all undertake a diagnostic assessments in the countries that help us to understand the capacity gaps in those environments. And this involves all stakeholders, whether they're private sector, the development partners who are there, government officials, academia, and so on and so forth. So understanding the gaps in the countries is what inform the type of policy and capacity development initiatives that we will provide for those countries. We also have what we call the institutional capacity development and fiduciary clinics. That one focuses on, if you approve a project, for example, for country A, do they have the capacity to manage that project in such a way that it brings the intended benefits that we want to see? We notice in some cases, the challenges are always that either the country does not have procurement capacity, or they do not have financial management capacity, or some of them do not have different kinds of capacity to manage the project. And by the bank's policy, if a project is approved and 1 year disbursement does not happen, that project will be cancelled, red flagged and cancelled. In that case, the benefit of that project will not materialize. So what we do, therefore, is to intervene at a point where countries do not get to that stage. So we go to the country, bring everybody together in the room who are responsible for implementing those projects, including the project implementation units in the country, to discuss what are the issues. And commitments are made. In 80% of the time, those solutions are found to those problems that are identified right there in the room. So these are just a few. I know we don't have a lot of time, but as we proceed, maybe in engaging in question and answer, I can talk a bit more about some other initiatives that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gunleye. I know you have so much to say to us, and I believe that a lot of people have been engaging with you bilaterally, and will continue to do that even after this. In the interest of time, I would like us to move into question and answer and contribution from the audience. So if you want to ask a question or you want to make a contribution, you raise your hand, but you have only 30 seconds. Let your question be focused on the issues that are being discussed. So somebody should pass around the mic. Is anybody around the mic? Maria? The ushers? Yeah. We have 4 partitions in this room. So I'll take one per partition. And a partition that doesn't have a representative, I'll give to another one. So let me take one person, the lady in lemon dress, please.
Thank you so much. All protocols are duly observed. My name is Dr. Adenike Olale. I'm a tax practitioner. I'm a senior inspector of Ogun State Government. To direct question to Dr. Adeyemi. While you were responding to the question asked, you made mention of remitting taxes by these multinational companies. So I want to take it from the aspect of pay as you earn, PAYE. So what we have discovered is that most of these multinational companies, they are not always open with their books. What they do is that they don't remit efficiently and adequately. They don't declare the numbers of expatriates working for them. This is a major issue. You request for SEPAC list, they don't reveal. So my question is, how do we go from here on the issue of compliance in making sure that they comply, they remit to appropriate authorities, be it company income tax, pay as you earn, and other lines of revenue? Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. The gentleman over there at the middle. The young man there. No. Up there. Up. Please stand up. Yeah.
Afternoon. My name is David Okoro from Veritas University, Abuja. And my question to Mr. Adeyemi, what innovative financial models can be used to attract foreign and local investment to transition states with high risk profiles? And how can infrastructure development be prioritized to stimulate economic transformation without placing too much burden on future generation with debt? And how do we ensure that economic development in transition states does not deepen inequality or exclude marginalized communities? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The lady in red glasses over there. I'll come back again.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and to the great panel. My name is Dr. Edugom Hansen. My question is directed to Dr. Ogunleyi from the African Development Institute. Hope I got your name correctly. I know that, well, you've talked about the partnerships that you go into to implement the initiatives you do implement through bilateral partnerships, multilateral organizations like the IMF and the rest. And we know that the private sector also has a great role to play in supporting the work you do. How do you involve the private sector to provide adequate support and to also help to trickle down the benefits from the initiatives that you support?
Thank you. I will come back, but let me take one. This side, this extreme side, if you don't have, okay. That's okay. Sorry. Please, the council, yeah, please.
Thank you very much. All protocols observed. Professor Mike Akpan is my name. I want to pick on certain issues. Corruption. All of us are corrupt. So we can't be pointing at, oh, as if it's in government. It is not. Now, I want to also say certain things about what we have been doing. What we have been saying here, we are saying it in the past 100 years. It's been the same thing. I'm 66 years plus. I've been hearing the same thing and over and over again. Now, I want to say this. And I want us to go back to NIEO, the new, what do you call it, new something. Then I want us to also look at how the advanced countries reacted to it. From there, we move to NEPAD. Now, I want us to go to, there's this Business Concord of July 2, 1991. That Business Concord covered 5 years of SAP in this country. Now, Tariq Hussein, then the IMF World Bank resident representative in Nigeria, wrote an article. And the title of that article was Nigeria Restructuring from Economic Dependence to Economic Self-Reliance. I want us to go and read that article. If you want, I'll send it to you. I'm going to exchange my, email with you. Then I also want us to go and read about the British Industrial Revolution. The innovation, what happened then, the role of the church and all that. Now, by the time we do all those things, I want you, the policymakers, I want you to bring them into your policy. Those 3 things I've asked you to do, go ahead and do them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Who else could have said this apart from a prof? He has given us an assignment to go and read articles. Please, Prof, make it available to us. And I hope you will not be very stingy with your marks. Thank you very much. Yes, please. I will take one more set of questions before passing on to the panel members. There are too many hands. The person that is smiling at me, I'll give him the chance. Please, the council member.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Sabo from Cambridge University.
Sorry, your mic is not good. Can they change it for you?
It's better. Okay, it's better now?
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Evan Osaboyan from Cambridge University, Otago State. I have a quick question to my brother Eric. Is to know what your institute is doing around AI and technology in all of this, your academy. Because one of the things that we've seen in low African trade and all of that is the issue of a language barrier. So I want to know whether there's real time currently or in future that anybody in your tool, you can choose the language you can access it and read time, so that if it's documented in Portuguese, it's in French, with the tool I can leverage on that and choose the language I can use. Because this time now is emerging. This is where Africa can actually leapfrog technology as AI is emerging. So I won't step back now and later I will cry that we are left behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let me take, Dr. Rich. Please give him,
Sir.
and I'll come over.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Friday Ohuchi. I'm the Chief Economic Advisor of Abia State. Mine is a question and a suggestion. And it's going straight to my big boss, Dr. Eric. states to 20.
Please, the mic is not doing well.
From 22 states to 22 transition states to 24 transition states. Now, what we need to do something that can help us discover states that are making progress, and maybe delist them from the ones we consider to be fragile states. One of the things I discovered is that interventions from the African Development Bank is demand-driven. The states themselves ask for these interventions. But before then, we also know we have diagnostic tests. So we need to develop a system where we can tick off what states have done well, and then have a way of trying to say that states that are making progress can now give this class as fragile states or as transition states, and then we see how we can manage that as a way of either dropping off some states or including others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Two more. This gentleman in black hat. Please make it very short and direct, please.
Hello? Okay, thank you very much. My question will go to Dr. Eric. I am Ugochukwu Henry, Dr. Ugochukwu Henry Abarakwe. I'm from University of Port Harcourt. I'm interested in Dr. Ogunleye's presentation. We have like minds. My interest actually is stemming from his insistence on indigenous-based solutions suited for the African environment, because that is the only way to go. You must have your own homegrown technologies for solving. Hello? So, but my question is, what arrangement have you made, or have you made to be able to capture the numerous homegrown solutions that are arising? If you go through the internet, almost every week, you find Nigerians, Africans responding to challenges, development challenges, technological challenges of Africa. But they are not harnessed. So I hope your bank, your institute is doing something to be able to move around and bring these people together, because one major challenge they have is finance and market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On that note, I want to pass on to the panelists for their response as much as we can. So let me start with Dr. Adeyemi Dupelu, please. You have most of the questions, and Dr. Eric Ogunleye.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the question about the difficulties that your state is having with the multinational corporations vis-a-vis personal income tax. So to those who are not Nigerians, it's just to explain that the tax system here, the federal government collects corporate income tax, company income tax, and the state have collect personal income taxes. So that question was that question basically was giving the pension for MNCs to play games with their books. How can they then hold them to account? And I think the first thing, of course, is to begin to use technology. In other words, use technology to assess the risk profile of these people. The second is to use the laws. I think the law starting in January would actually enable tax authorities to be able to go into the accounts held by companies. By companies exist now, but I think it will be extended to individuals. So again, you should be able to check. But third, it speaks to the issue of coherence. If these people are here on expatriate quotas, I'm sure they make some declarations to the Federal Ministry of Interior. So you should collaborate with the Interior to get those details in order to be able to insist on payment. And of course, at the global level, there's the whole issue of country-by-country reporting, which requires all of the companies to break down what they make in each jurisdiction. And if you pour through that, I'm sure you'll be able to find the kind of resources they expend on their staff. That's with regard to the PAYE. With regard to the innovative financing models, I like your question. The reason I like it is that it's very mainstream, you know. So Africans, we must forget about taxes. We must forget about remittances. We must forget about how best we can use the resources available to us, how we can stop people from leaking our resources, to worrying about innovative financing. The man who used the old financing has made money. You are not making money, but you want to make money by going innovative, which is fine. So yes, if you want, there's climate finance. You can talk of carbon offsets. You can talk of green financing. You can talk of even using pension funds to underpin. You can even talk about all sorts of things, airline taxes. They're all there. But as I said, I'm not in that school. My school is someone has used something successfully. He's now telling you, no, don't bother about that. You go and use innovative. You're going nowhere. But more importantly, you spoke about debt. I want to know the country, especially among the among the emerging economies that has not used debt successfully to develop. Yes, we don't want to burden future generations. It is how you use the debt, what you use it for, and the transparency with which it is deployed that matters, not to say don't touch debt. It's a very important mindset, and I want to leave it there, except to say, go check. Fastest growing country in the world is China. Go and check how much they have used debt to transform their economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please, I would like to allow one of the transition state participants who is keen of asking a question to do that, please. The gentleman from Sierra Leone. Okay, please pass the mic to him. Please, 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was going to request more than 30, but I'll find you to do this. Okay, thank you so much. I'm from Sierra Leone, one of the transition states, used to be called fragile state, where illicit financial flows has actually made fragility reinforcing itself. And reinforcing itself in the sense that it's just very difficult for countries in fragile state, or you call them transition state, to really bounce and fight illicit financial flow without the involvement of institutions such as, the bank of the African Development Bank, to send out information outside there as to how really these leakages have eaten into the fabric of the state. It's just very critical. So I'm asking the bank, actually, what conscious effort would you think you can make to do a real fight against illicit financial flows? Get it right there. Fight them, then all of our financing problems, will be solved. That is why. But please allow me to just ask one more question, and this relates to blended finance operations across the world. UN Capital Development has said that in the last 10 years, 2,000 blended finance operations have actually taken place across the world, but only 20% happen in the developing world, and I think just 4% of that in Africa. Why? Have we not been able to really, gain from this? I know someone mentioned the issue of credit rating, which is very critical. How do we resolve these issues? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will give Dr. Ogunleye 1 minute to respond to all the questions that have been directed to him. Dr. Ogunleye, please. And Gurav, get Sidwell online, please, so that I can give the closing remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try my best. I think the first question is from Dr. Hansen. How do we involve private sector to be able to provide capacity development. Very simple. We have, like I said earlier, the Public Finance Management Academy Executive Training. And one of the modules is the relationship between public and private sector in driving and improving public financial management in Africa. And for that module, we have in fact, at a point we had a sitting managing director of a bank in Nigeria who participated, and we just came back from Benin Republic, right? Was it Benin or Togo? Where we had a conference, and we brought about 2 or so former managing directors of the bank in Nigeria to participate in that training, and an executive director, also sitting executive director of one of the banks, also participated. So that is just to help you see that we are actively engaging the private sector. The bank also has what we call the Capital Market Development Trust Fund, which is a competition on annual basis where private sector practitioners are required, or are requested actually, to send in a proposal to see if they could provide any transformation or any reform that they want to see in the capital market. Again, that is also a private sector focused engagement. Now, the second question was from Professor Sabohen, and his question is about AI and technology. My answer to that is what we're doing currently at the bank is to, first of all, conscientize us internally. Let us develop internal capacity first. We have a series, and I'll invite you to join us. We call it Information and Library, Learning Series. And one of them, if you check online, you will find out one of these series focus on AI and the use of AI, in whatever you're doing to support your work, to improve your productivity, and so on and so forth. So we are actually actively looking at that. And the point you made too about the fact that you should have a provision to be able to read any publications where is AI generated in different languages, that is ongoing. Again, we are developing what we call the Virtual Capacity Development Academy, which will be the platform the bank would use to deliver all these training. And it includes this aspect of AI support, learning management series, modules, bite-sized learning, and so on and so forth. Now, Professor Huche, with regard to the increase in the number of transition states from 22 to 24, identifying progress and what we can do. It will interest you to know that the bank, in fact, the African Development Institute, had just led the preparation and launch of an interesting and innovative public service delivery index in Africa. And what that public service delivery index in Africa does is to understand the progress that countries are making in 5 dimensions and 100 sub-dimensions. So whether you're talking about energy service, whether you're talking about inclusivity, inclusion, and so on, health, education, and so on, whether you're looking at regional integration, to what extent are we improving internal cohesion, internal trade within the continent, and so on. So that is what we're doing. And as we go further, we're almost starting the preparation of the second volume, which will come out in 2027, where we'll see further. We've created a benchmark data currently that we'll build on going forward. And from that, countries are already coming. Mauritius came to us and said, please, we want to domesticate this. The Minister of Public Service and Reforms, we're supporting them currently to be able to develop similar things for the country. And that's what we want to see across the African countries. About 2 other countries have also come for us, we
are in injury time.
Then Dr. Ugochukwu, okay. Maybe Dr. Ugochukwu will meet and talk
please,
about the question.
Any other person, his or her question was not addressed, please, we can engage the panel members bilaterally after this. I want to ask for the indulgence of the President to give us just 5 minutes to make our closing remarks. So I invite Dr. Sidwell Hove, the Division Manager of the Policy Management Division of the African Development Institute to please give us the closing remarks for this session. Thank you. Sidwell. Is it off? It's muted. Please, Sidwell, can you unmute yourself and speak if you're there?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen and panelists. So, honorable ministers, senior officials of the Nigeria government, the senior officials from the transition states, the president and the council members of the Nigerian Economic Society members, scholars, development partners, colleagues from the African Development Bank, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the African Development Institute and the African Development Bank Group, I wish to express my deep appreciation on to everyone who contributed to today's important policy dialogue session. I particularly thank the Nigerian Economic Society for inviting the bank to be a partner at this historic conference. Today's policy dialogues under the theme Driving Africa's Economic Transformation in Transition States was purposefully designed to tackle the pressing challenges facing our continent's transition states. The session was grounded in the following, of course, objectives. That is to identify the enablers and barriers to structural transformation and inclusive growth, to share best practices and experiences as we have heard, to formulate actionable policy recommendations in order to drive structural transformation and inclusive in transition states. These discussions were expected to culminate really into concrete outcomes and policy recommendations in order to drive this transformation process. I wish to acknowledge the outstanding contributions of our speakers and panelists, namely Dr. Abdul Kamara, the Director General of the Nigeria Country Department, for his warm welcome and reaffirmation of the bank's commitment to Nigeria and the transition states. Dr. Eric Ogunle, our Director of the African Development Institute of the bank group, for his keynote address emphasizing investment, of course, in people, institutions, and technologies to support the achievement of the sustained 7% plus growth that is required to meet the African Union Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. I also wish to thank so much our panelists who include again, Dr. Eric Ogunleye, Dr. Ademi Dipolu, Dr. Emmanuel Ousu Sekre, and Professor Jane Mariara, who provided rich insight on how to drive Africa's economic transformation in transition states, especially highlighting the role of soft infrastructure of knowledge and capacity development. They've highlighted the roles of economic policy, resource mobilization, development financing, partnerships, strengthening of capacity development and knowledge brokerage in achieving this objective. Finally, I would like to thank the moderator of today's Policy Dialogue, Mr. Chidebere, for expertly anchoring the session and facilitating deep discussions and engagements as we have seen. So from today's discussions and peer exchanges, particularly with the heads of debt management and economic planning departments from the 22 transition states. We draw quite a number of lessons. Some of them, I'll just highlight just a few of them to take home. The issue of capacity development is really fundamental and foundational to economic growth. Robust institutions and skilled human capital are also the key prerequisites for economic transformation. And of course, highlighting that education training reforms empower nations to effectively design and implement development programs. The other one, of course, is the issue that knowledge management can really help to scale impact, especially as innovations must move beyond isolated projects, but ensure systematic knowledge would help to capture dissemination through platforms. For example, what Dr. Ogunle highlighted, the bank's virtual capacity development academy and a lot of knowledge products, I think, which we are showcasing in one of our stands. So all these are very important enablers to structural transformation and to making sure that knowledge is transformed into development outcomes. Another takeaway, of course, is the issue of partnerships, which we have seen that they are important in unlocking progress, especially realizing that sustainable transformation requires collaboration between national governments, which may include the regional economic communities, the academia, the private sector, development partners, civil society, and so forth. I believe that this dialogue will be critical in yielding, the following outcomes. I believe it will help to enhance a deeper understanding of the key enablers of structural transformation in economic and sustainable development, and also highlight challenges and solutions to those challenges. It will also help to strengthen the networks and collaboration among stakeholders and provide a comprehensive outcome. Of course, at the end of this dialogue process, we'll try to prepare some policy briefs and some comprehensive, documents which will help to provide all these knowledge solutions which have been discussed to our countries, and to help to shape, country strategies and national, development plans. So allow me also to now extend appreciation to the Nigerian Economic Society for their leadership and hospitality, the conference secretariat, the IT teams for excellent coordination of this policy dialogue, the interpreters team for breaking the language barriers and allowing discussions to be clear and understandable, and again, more importantly, all the participants and delegates, both in person and virtual, for the active contributions and valuable insights during this dialogue. So as we conclude, let us carry forward this great momentum which has been initiated here. The African Development Bank stands ready to support your national institutions through co-created tailored capacity building, policy research, and technical assistance for the achievements of the national economic transformation aspiration and national economic goals. So I wish you fruitful deliberations in the remaining sessions. of this conference, and safe travels, of course, to your respective countries. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Sidwell. On this note, permit me to close this session of the policy dialogue, and I want to thank my panel members and all the participants, including those who were connected virtually. Thank you, everyone, and I wish you all the best. The panel members will have to have a family photograph before they leave the podium, please. And the president of the NES should join us, please. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, another warm round of applause for the panelists. Thank you, Dr. Abdul Kamara, Dr. Eric Ogunleye, Dr. Sidwell Hove, Mr. Chidi Ebere Ibe, Dr. Adeyemi Dikbeolu, Dr. Emmanuel Owusu Shekere, and Professor Jane Mariara.